I am honored to introduce Ruben Chandrasekar, who is the Executive Director of the International Rescue Committee in Maryland. Ruben joined the IRC in Baltimore as a program coordinator in 2010. He promptly took a leadership role by defining IRC as a stakeholder in strengthening the social and economic health of Baltimore City. In 2011, he was promoted to the position of Community Integration Program Manager and subsequently promoted to Executive Director of IRC in Baltimore in 2012 and IRC of Maryland in 2015. Before coming to the IRC, Ruben was Program Director for the American Friends Service Committee in Baltimore, where he worked to protect the labor rights of immigrant and refugee workers, provided education to facilitate access to public benefits, and supported a class action lawsuit to expedite access to life-saving public benefits. Ruben has a master's degree in sociology with a concentration in labor and migration.
Thank you so much, Julissa, and welcome, Ruben.
Thank you so much.
Great. We were hoping you could start by defining humanitarian immigration and talking to us about a bit about the IRC's work.
Yeah, so humanitarian immigrants is a broad category that defines people who are forced to flee their countries because of a well-founded fear of persecution based on a number of factors: religion, nationality, political affiliation, and various other identities. When they flee their countries of origin and cross an international border, it's possible for them to then be categorized as a refugee by the United Nations. Currently there are roughly 70 million refugees who have crossed an international border and have sought protection in a second country. Another large category within the humanitarian immigrant umbrella are people who are seeking asylum. And these are typically individuals who cross, again, an international border because of a fear of persecution in their home country and seek the protection of another country. And we see that played out, quite a bit in the US on a daily basis as people cross both the southern and northern border seeking asylum in the US. The IRC is a humanitarian organization that was founded in 1933 by the suggestion of Albert Einstein. And in essence, what we do is work with people who are forcibly displaced in 40 different countries and in 25 US cities. And abroad, we help people who've crossed an international border or who have been internally displaced in their own country get access to humanitarian aid. And in the US, we work as a resettlement agency where we welcome refugees who've been admitted into the country by the US government, as well as serve those with asylum to help them start a new life.
Great. Thanks, Ruben, for sharing that. And how do you see your work at the IRC tied to the film we just watched? And have you met people like Amir and Imran through
the the IRC, we've been operating in Maryland, in Baltimore since 1999 and Silver Spring since 2006. And in the last 20 years, we've probably combined to serve about 25,000 humanitarian immigrants in Maryland. So we're quite busy serving individuals like, Amir and Imran. In fact, more recently in the last year, we have been actually resettling individuals coming out of Papua New Guinea from these detention centers in Maryland. The range of services that we offer include, welcoming them when they get off the plane, helping to provide them with housing. In this area, it's principally in Prince George's County because it's a bit more affordable. So housing, access to healthcare and public benefits upon arrival, and then very quickly helping them to find work so that they can become financially self-sufficient within 4 to 6 months, like that first job kind of gets them over the hump of being able to pay their basic necessities. And then we work with our clients over a 5-year period to help them with many other things as they rebuild their lives, like helping them to rebuild a career. We have an immigration legal services department that helps people file for their green cards and become U.S. citizens over the 5 to 6 years that we interact with them after they arrive. Yeah.
Great. And then Ruben, can you comment? This discussion is about politics and humanitarian immigration. So can you comment on watching that video, how you saw politics playing a role in the lives of Amir and Imran? What are the political things going on that impacted their journeys and their
stories? Yeah, I always like to say that, human rights are not like the forces of gravity, right? Like you can wake up tomorrow and be assured that if you take a misstep, you're going to fall and gravity is going to pull you down. Like gravity is a constant, right? Human rights, on the other hand, is not. This is something that people have fought for over generations to build, right? These are social constructs that people have struggled and organized around. And I would say that, if you look at the history of the development of human rights, with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 followed, which essentially defined that all humans have access to certain fundamental rights and freedoms, right, regardless of nationality, etc. And then that was built upon by the UN Refugee Convention, right, in 1951, which said, if you've been forcibly displaced as a human, you have the right to seek asylum, right? And there are governments that have ratified this convention that then receive and welcome strangers to protect them. And in the US, that was enshrined into a law in the 1980s. It's called the Refugee Act in the US. And from 1980, the US has taken on the responsibility of welcoming a certain small percentage, less than 1% of the refugees on the planet, into the US through a very organized refugee resettlement system, of which the IRC is a part, right? And the historical average over the last 40 years, so from 1980 to 2020, has been about 75,000 refugees have been admitted historically annually into the US. Since this administration came to power, that has been curtailed tremendously. And this year, the administration's policies, because of those policies, which are very xenophobic, will limit the number of refugees to less than 15,000, right? So the historical average is 75,000. This year, it may be 15,000. So our commitment to this human rights, to refugee rights, is certainly diminished as a result of public policy, right? So, and that's why I say, human rights are not like the forces of gravity, right? Like we can't count on it. And I think it's great that you guys are convening this panel discussion around MC votes, right? Because we do have an election coming up, and we, I think, have the opportunity to let the government know what kind of immigration policies we would prefer.
Good, that's helpful. Do you have any concluding comments you'd like to share, Ruben?
Well, I would, just to continue with that, I think social action is very, very important to protect the rights of those seeking protection. And certainly one of the areas of great concern to me right now is the U.S. southern border policy of returning those seeking our protection without any kind of access to due process. So anyone seeking protection had previously could count on a fair hearing by an immigration officer at the border, or a border agent, or a court system, to ensure that if they had a credible fear of persecution, that they had a fair hearing. And now people are not allowed to do that. In fact, if you travel through Mexico in order to come into the US, people are returned to Mexico immediately without any kind of due process as it relates to the asylum claim. And that has caused hundreds of thousands of people to be put back in danger. And one of the fundamental principles of the Refugee Convention and the U.S. Refugee Act is is to prevent people from being returned to danger, right? And that's a fundamental law of human rights and US policy, which is being violated.
All right, thank you for giving us a lot to think about, Ruben. We're getting some questions in the chat, but I'm going to ask people to hold their questions for the Q&A. And right now we are going to pivot to our second speaker. So now I would like to ask MC student Kyle Mathis to introduce to us Councilmember Gabe Albornoz. Go ahead, Kyle.
Councilmember Albornoz is a lifelong resident of Montgomery County and is deeply committed to the county, its people, and as the son of immigrant parents, its diversity. He has dedicated his career to public service and advocating for social justice policies. In 2018, Gabe was elected to the Montgomery County Council as an at-large member representing more than 1 million county residents. He currently chairs the Health and Human Services Committee, where he oversees public health and human services that impact children, adults, and seniors in Montgomery County. Gabe also serves on the Public Safety Committee, where he reviews current policies to maintain transparency and to increase the accountability of our public safety departments. Gabe is truly at large, having lived in Gettysburg, Silver Spring, Bethesda, and now Kensington. Gabe graduated from Walt Whitman High School, received his Bachelor of Arts in Communication from UMD, and an MBA from Johns Hopkins University. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kyle. That was a great introduction. I'm honored to be with all of you.
Thank you for joining us today, Councilmember Albornoz. And to start, would you share some general information about the immigrant community in Montgomery County and discuss how county politics and policies impact that community?
Great. Well, thank you, Hannah. And it's an honor to be on this panel with Ruben. I'm familiar with your work, Ruben, and your organization. And this is the first opportunity I've had to meet you virtually, but I want to follow up on some of that really great work, particularly around housing, because I think there's a lot more we need to do there. One of the things I'm most proud of is being the son of immigrants. My parents immigrated here from South America and actually both attended Montgomery College. And so I have nothing but incredible love and admiration for MC and all of your programs and services, which, you know, I can honestly say I wouldn't be here on this planet without them. So thank you for all that you guys do. We have an incredible immigrant community here in Montgomery County, as was stated earlier. Over 32% of our population is foreign born. There are over 100 languages spoken in our public school system. And Montgomery County has a rich tradition of being a welcoming community, both in policy and in practice, and is why my family immigrated here so many years ago and so many continue to immigrate here now. And local government plays a critical role in helping to support our immigrant and refugee families here. And I'm proud that Montgomery County has a rich history of supporting our immigrant community. Our community prides itself on wanting to make sure that we are as welcoming as we can be. And as Ruben mentioned, the last 4 years have been extraordinarily difficult because we have been trying to hold the line from a policy perspective, trying to push back on the outright assault against immigration, both illegal and legal immigration, and our county residents who are contributing economically, socially, culturally, and are every bit as important members of our community as anyone else, have been experiencing the stress and the anxiety and the anxiousness that has come about because of this presidential administration. So the council has acted in a number of ways. Just a few examples were under the previous council, but then increased through this council. We have a legal defense fund in which we provide county resources to immigrants seeking asylum. As we know, immigrants that are able to access a quality immigration lawyer have a significantly better chance of being able to have status here. So the council has put forward resources. In addition to that, last year, our county executive put into policy what had been a practice, which is confirming that our local government does not cooperate with federal immigration authorities. That is a federal issue, that is not a local issue. And we have also worked to provide support to organizations such as Casa de Maryland, Identity, and many others who provide direct services to our immigrant community. And we make as clear as we can that it is not a concern of us where you came from. We are here to provide services and love and support to all of our families here in Montgomery County. So in both policy and practice, we here in Montgomery County do our best to make sure that our immigrant community feels welcomed, safe, and is put in the best position to thrive, because when they succeed, we all succeed.
That's great. Thank you for sharing your perspective. Is there any particular work you've done on the county council that relates to immigration or immigrants in our community that you would like to highlight?
Sure. Well, I think the enhancement of the Legal Defense Fund was important, but particularly in the last 6 months through COVID, the council has been doing an awful lot to try and support our entire community. And I'll give you a few examples. The federal government made available stimulus checks several months ago to a number of residents across the country, citizens across the country. But unfortunately, our immigrant community, in many cases, could not access that additional $1,200, which has been a lifeline for so many people. And so the council actually, in partnership with the county executive, provided in 2 tranches over $10 million in funds to help those immigrant communities and our immigrant families be able to access resources. We've also significantly expanded our food security program. We have frozen rent so that it couldn't be increased through the pandemic, and we've extended that beyond what the state has enacted. And we have also increased funding for rent because we know there is a tsunami coming of people who will not be able to access. And very recently, I was very proud to join my colleague, Councilmember Nancy Navarro, and all of the members of the council to unanimously stand up an initiative that is also being mirrored in our African American community because of the disproportionate impact of COVID on our Black and Brown community. And so we have stood up, expanded testing, contact tracing, and culturally appropriate promotores, health promotores, to help our numerous communities access programs and services. And I'll say this, Hannah, too, and it goes back to your earlier question, and this is tragic, but we've had 5 town halls in Spanish, and in every single one of them, one of the top 5 questions that was asked was whether accessing a test or accessing medical services would impact public charge and would impact their immigration status. The fact that people are processing that and hesitating even slightly puts us all at risk from a public health standpoint. So the county's working overtime, both from a policy perspective and a public relations and perspective as well, to get the word out.
Thank you for sharing all that. And I do think it's a really good point and a good example where, protecting and supporting immigrant neighbors protects and supports us all. So I think that's a good way to highlight that. So in preparing for this, a lot of students asked to hear a little bit more about DACA. So I'm just gonna throw you a broad question of what key information do you think that we should all know about DACA?
Well, the first is that the county services, both whether it's health and human services, housing, does not require anything related to immigration status. And so that is particularly true of all of our public educational systems here in Montgomery County. And so while our residents are here, while they're going through that arduous, difficult process of immigration, we are doing what we can to ensure that our DACA families thrive while they are here, that they receive the best possible education, that they receive the best possible medical and health benefits, that we provide housing when we can. And so it does not matter to us whether or not people have immigration status to be able to access local county government services and programs. And we are also working closely with our federal delegation because we're fortunate that temporarily the Supreme Court on a 5-4 vote voted to extend the executive orders under the previous administration. But we know that's not a long-term solution. And so to Ruben's point about voting and this time that we are in now, we're focused very much on our federal election, as we should, and the president, because there is, my gosh, I don't need to tell anybody on this Zoom call how important this election is. But we also need to focus on a number of the congressional races too, both across the country, because until we have long-term federal immigration reform, and we haven't had it since the 1980s, then we're going to continue to perpetually have this problem over and over and over again. And we know the stress and health risks that brings to our immigrant community. And so there's so much more that needs to be done in that space.
Great. So just as a last question, are there any concluding comments you'd like to share before we move into Q&A?
No, I guess I'm a glass half full kind of person. This is, obviously an unprecedented time on every conceivable level, both from the health aspects of COVID, the recovery, and the disproportionate impact and outright assault on our immigrant community by this presidential administration. But the video was troubling and challenging, but it also heartwarming because there are so many people that are out there who on their own, whether they're in a position to enact policy or through their church or through their community, are volunteering, are doing what they can, both in big ways and smalls, to help make sure that we support our immigrant communities. And it's one of the greatest things about our country and one of the most challenging and something that has to continue through all of this so that we can weather this storm and come out of this on the other side stronger than we were before.
I'm going to talk just very briefly about how during this fall 2020 election, the basic need to know to take action, whether or not you have voting rights. So let's just briefly go through this. So as you hopefully know, an election for president of the United States will be taking place this fall. U.S. citizens who are 18 years old on or before November 3rd may vote. In Maryland, you'll be able to vote also on your representative to the U.S. Congress. There's Board of Education candidates, and there will also be questions about the state budget, legalizing sports gambling, and more. You must register in the United States in order to vote. So you have to take that option to opt in to being able to vote. In Maryland, that deadline is October 13th. So if you've never registered to vote before, your first step is going to be to register to vote. If you're a first-time voter, you can also register in person on November 3rd, but that is not encouraged, especially because we are anticipating that there will be a lot of lines and that it will be very challenging to vote in person on Election Day. So we in Student Life would love to help you get registered before then. Last but not least, there's also a strong encouragement to request your absentee ballot, or you might hear it called a mail-in ballot. And the deadline to do that is also the same as the deadline to register to vote. So that's going to be October 13th. Early voting is going to be October 26th through November 2nd. And again, Election Day is November 3rd. So there's a great resource where you can get started, and we'll drop this link into the chat, and you'll be seeing us promote it a lot this fall. And that is the wonderful League of Women Voters, vote411.org. That is a place where you can get started, and I'll show you just briefly what that looks like. It is a really wonderful resource that is nonpartisan, purely educational, and it will work for any state or district where you are eligible to vote. So you can get started by registering, you can check your voter registration status, you can even find out what is on the ballot. So we definitely want to encourage you to be thinking about using that resource. Now, there are 5 R's of being ready to vote this fall. As we said, you must register. We're encouraging you to request your absentee ballot. You want to do some research. Once you receive your ballot, you're going to fill it out according to the instructions, and then you will return it. So step 1, registering, you need to be eligible to vote in U.S. elections. So you must be a U.S. citizen. Permanent residents, green card holders, international students are not eligible to vote in U.S. elections. You might be eligible to vote in a local municipal election, but just know that you do need to be eligible to vote in that presidential election. And we're also encouraging everyone to have your registration be current and correct. So make sure your address is correct, make sure your name matches your official legal first and last name. Here in Maryland, we have not seen quite the election registration purges that some other states have, but it is still something that can interfere with your ability to vote. So you want to always make sure during an election that your registration is current and correct. I'm going to skip over this video, but there is in this slide that we'll email out to everyone a quick video that tells you a little bit more about who is eligible. So again, we're requesting that everyone consider voting by mail. It's free, it's safe, it's easy, but voting in person will also be an option. That said, you can use this short link, bbm_mc_votes. It'll take you right to the page where you can request your absentee ballot. A note about that, please don't wait. Do it today. If you are registered to vote and you know you're going to vote, request your absentee ballot now. We are expecting that it is going to take some time for your ballot to arrive in your mailbox, and we are encouraging everyone to do it as soon as possible. I did it yesterday. It took me 2 minutes. And so I do encourage you to take that time today to request your absentee ballot. Once you receive it, you're going to fill it out, and there'll be lots of ways that you can return it. But if you want to vote in person, there will be options such as early voting, October 26th through November 2nd. On election day at select voting centers, please note, we do not anticipate all polls being able to be open. So if you are someone who has voted in the past on election day in your neighborhood, please know that we are expecting not all polls to be open. We don't have enough election workers and enough space to safely do that. So we expect there to be reduced voting centers, and we absolutely expect lines. This is one of the reasons we are strongly encouraging that you vote by mail. You can also vote during early voting, or you can drop your ballot off at the Board of Elections. Please remember that voting by mail helps you avoid those lines, helps you protect others, and protect yourself. Either way, you need a plan to vote. Who will you vote for? How will you vote? And when will you vote? So we want you to do some research. What elections will be on your ballot? Which candidates best match your positions and goals? So again, you can request your absentee ballot, and while you're waiting for that, we encourage you to go to vote411.org/ballot, and it will tell you who are the candidates that are going to be on your ballot for your district and your neighborhood. It will tell you what questions are you going to be able to vote on, like whether or not you think sports gambling should be legalized in Maryland. We also recommend this wonderful resource, isidewith.com/political quiz, where you can fill out a brief questionnaire, and it'll give you a percentage based on your answers of how candidates match up with you. It's a wonderful resource, isidewith.com/political quiz. Once you receive your ballot in the mailbox, you can actually begin to fill it out. You can follow where your ballot is by going to voter services through the Maryland Board of Elections, and they'll tell you if it's being processed. They'll tell you if it's literally in the mail. You're going to return it. No postage is necessary, so you don't need to go out and buy stamps. It's already prepaid in Maryland. And you can either put it back in your mailbox, or you can drop it off at an official drop box or a voting center, and the sites of those will be publicized on those resources. So last but not least, early voting, again, is an option. Election day is an option, but we really want to encourage everyone to be considering absentee voting. Just because we are running out of time, I encourage you to reach out to Student Life if you'd like to know more about how to get involved in volunteering, how to get involved in our MC Vote Student Ambassador Program, and just want to thank Hannah Stocks and our guest today for a wonderful program and great conversation. Thank you, everyone.